myself and my pillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For a limited time, you can get my brand new product, My Slippers, for 50% off. That's the lowest price ever. And remember, My Slippers come with an exclusive 4-layer design. These layers combine to give you amazing comfort and support and help reduce stress on your feet. And with the durable indoor-outdoor sole, you can wear My Slippers anytime, anywhere. I personally guarantee these will be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to get My Slippers for 50% off, the lowest price in history. And if you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Hi, everyone. Before we get started, I wanted to thank Mike Lindell for generously sponsoring our podcast. He's been sponsoring our podcast for quite some time now. I'm Patty McMurray, and I'm with 100% Fed Up, and this is my good friend Jim Hoft of the Gateway Pundit. And tonight we'd like to welcome two very special guests who Jim and I have both been anxious to talk to. It's taken us a few tries, but we've finally gotten them both together, and we're very excited about it. Erick Kaardal of the Thomas More Society has been working diligently on investigating what happened, not just in Wisconsin, but in other states in the November 2020 election. And former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Mike Gableman, who's also the special counsel working on the election in Wisconsin and what happened in Wisconsin, both made headlines when they testified the other day in front of the Wisconsin Assembly and Elections Commission. And they talked about, or they presented, Justice Gableman presented his final report on the election. And I think before we get started, I'd like to ask, I've been talking to Erick more than I have to Justice Gableman on the phone about what's been happening in Wisconsin. And I just wanted to kind of get a little background, Erick, if you could just explain your role in what's been happening with the investigation in Wisconsin. I know yesterday we saw you talk about the nursing homes, and you actually interviewed patients in the nursing homes. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, but also talk about the Zuckerberg 5. That's been the big topic, Zuckerberg 5, and what that means.
Well, I think to begin with, I just want to thank both of you and Mike for participating. I think this is a very important time to be talking about what's going on in Wisconsin. Mike just issued the special counsel's report. It's a fantastic report, covered many areas of election integrity deficits in Wisconsin. And so I think that just begin, I'd like to just say that I'm surprised that we've gotten this far. When I started doing election law litigation back in the 1990s, I saw it, here's a lawsuit, here's a lawsuit, here's a lawsuit, election official violating law there, election official violating a law over here. And it never occurred to me that there would be election integrity would be a subject area. But when I moved from, after the 2020 election, I went to Washington, D.C., and I started doing litigation in different states. And I saw that the election official illegalities in Wisconsin and Minnesota were the same ones in Michigan and in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. I mean, they're exact same illegalities. And I said, well, what's going on here? This is systemic. How would you ever in a subject area get systemic violations of the law across states? And then we started researching these progressive nonprofits, Erick, like you have, CTCL, CEIR, National Vote at Home Institute, goes on. And all of a sudden, oh, okay, these progressives are so committed and so well financed that they can push our election officials into systemic violations of law, state by state, to win elections. And that's where we've kind of gotten. And I think that the two things you mentioned, the financing by Zuckerberg and Chan through the Center for Tech and Civic Life to the urban cities and the swing states, is one aspect. 100% registered resident voting rates in nursing homes is another aspect. And so these are all just aspects of the same scheme run over and over and over again. And I think that my report was basically, here are 10 subject areas of election official illegalities. I mean, serial violations of the law that need to be cleaned up in Wisconsin. And, and then, of course, Mike's huge report where a government investigator found that these illegalities existed.
Terrific. For the people who are just tuning in, would it be possible for you, Justice Gableman, to briefly describe your findings to the audience who maybe has not kept up on this story?
I just want to, yes, of course, sir. And Jim, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your tireless and very, very important work on this subject. It's something that needs to be dragged out to the light of day. And your recent series about Erick, the Electronic Registration Information Center, and David Becker, I think really moved the ball towards election integrity forward a lot. And I really, the main findings of the report relate to a very simple and straightforward plan on the part of a relatively few number of people that they did here in Wisconsin, especially in our 5 largest cities, but that they replicated in many, many states throughout the country. And the simple plan was this, that Mark Zuckerberg wanted to defeat Donald Trump. And so he and his wife put in about $400 million to the effort, of which they gave about $330 million to a Chicago private entity called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which was started and is run by all former Obama staffers, all trained in Get Out the Vote. Now, why it's significant that their training and background is in Obama Get Out the Vote is because the way that Center for Tech and Civic Life came into Wisconsin was to promise money to keep Wisconsin citizens safe from COVID. And then, so great, that's in the early days of COVID. People are panicking. People don't know what's happening. Even though nobody asked for any money, no city had said that they were without money for COVID safety. The Federal CARES Act and the state grants were all covering COVID safety just fine. They didn't need money for COVID safety, and that's given the proof. The proof for that is found they wound up spending less than 1% of the $10 million that they got. They spent less than 1% of that on COVID safety. The rest was all a Get Out the Vote campaign for the Biden. Remember, these are the 5 biggest Democrat-controlled cities in our state. Each of the mayors is a Democrat. Each of the mayors is motivated to defeat Donald Trump and elect Joe Biden. And they call it a grant, but it was not a grant. In my 3.5 hours before the Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections 2 days ago, I said this wasn't a grant. This was more like an employment or an agency relationship, because the mayors of those 5 cities rented out the power and authority of the elections administration apparatus of their cities to get out the vote for Joe Biden. And if they didn't do precisely what CTCL, that is the former Obama staffers who are working for Mark Zuckerberg, if the mayors didn't do precisely what CTCL told them to do about getting out the vote, about running their elections, about working with these outside interest groups that CTCL called partners, everybody else would call them employees or agents. And so that's the simple plan. They identified David Plouffe, who was Obama's key campaign manager and helping Obama come up from the streets of Chicago all the way to the White House. David Plouffe wrote the book in 2020 called A Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. very subtly titled book, right? We don't. It certainly has
A lot of
nothing
mystery.
It's right. It's not a mystery, Patty. And it certainly had nothing to do with COVID safety. But yet, who is the guy in charge of farming the money out and selecting the cities that are going to get this money? It's David Plouffe. It's David Plouffe and his hired hands at CTCL. And then if the cities don't do exactly what David Plouffe and CTCL tell them to do, then they have to give the $10 million back. That's not a grant. That's an employment contract. And then to round it all out, to round this cover-up out, now that we're on to him, not one mayor, not one clerk, not one person from CTCL or any of the outside groups will respect our state assembly's subpoenas to come in and talk about what they did in Wisconsin during the election. And it kind of puts my blood pressure even higher when I think about the January 6th commission. And they're putting people, they got people in solitary confinement. And they've got people with the subpoenas that they are very robustly enforcing. And so when the Democrats want to investigate something, they sure know how to use the legislative subpoena. But when they want to cover up their illegal conduct, which did constitute elections bribery. Elections bribery is what it was. It's illegal in Wisconsin. Yes, sir.
So my question was, there were reports that you subpoenaed these mayors and that they were going to, that they refused to come in to testify in front of you. And I'm wondering where that ended up.
It's in the courts. We've got about 9 ongoing lawsuits, plus or minus. We've got, David Becker has come into town, and he was the recipient of $70 million of Mark Zuckerberg money in 2020. And he's been coordinating, as you know, Jim, you wrote all about his entity, Erick, and his George Soros funded Erick. But now David Becker got $70 million from Mark Zuckerberg. And one of the things that Becker is doing with it is he's come into Wisconsin to offer free, or that is Mark Zuckerberg financed lawyers for any election official who may have information relevant to my investigation in order to help them fight it. So they're fighting it out. I've got roughly 9 lawsuits, all designed to obstruct. Becker came to town and he did a 2-hour press conference, which our state's largest paper just slavishly, because it's their partisan agenda, called Becker a nonpartisan and called his group nonpartisan, and quoted Becker as saying that the Wisconsin Elections Commission and CTCL and the CTCL funded by Mark Zuckerberg ran a perfect election in Wisconsin. So here's the guy who got $70 million from Mark Zuckerberg coming in to defend people from having to answer questions by me, who's investigating what was done with the Zuckerberg money. So that's all tied up in the courts right now, and it's creating quite a diversion. But I believe the Speaker of the Assembly, I know the Speaker is very well aware that the legislature's right and obligation to perform legislative oversight has to be vindicated in the courts. So that's step one, to get court orders requiring these public servants, so-called public servants, to do what they should do. If they ran, Twinkie sometimes wants to hog the spotlight, and I probably should lock her away, but that's Twinkie. If they ran the perfect election that they say they did, why don't they want to talk about it? The answer is simple, because they know what they did was wrong. They know it's probably illegal, and now they're doing everything they can to cover it up. And if you notice, after my 3 hours plus or minus of talking at the legislature the other day, and the Democrats on the committee, they didn't really find much fault with any of the substance of what I was saying or alleging. They really didn't spend much time on that issue. But what happened overnight is that the media, especially at the Journal Sentinel, a once great newspaper, and they came in and they're the public relations arm now for the Democratic Party, because they came in and they picked up on one small minor thing that I had put in the second appendix to my 136-page report, outlining just a suggestion to the legislature that at some point they might want to consider a process when the Wisconsin Elections Commission itself. Because remember, none of this could have happened without the official blessing of the people who are supposed to be administering a fair and independent election in Wisconsin, and that's called the Wisconsin Election Commission. Now, Jim, ending this portion of my comments where we began with your work on Erick, the Electronic Registration Information Center, the one founded with George Soros money by David Becker, the guy who has come to town now to cover up all of the misdeeds and illegal action of the recipients of the Zuckerberg money, including the 5 mayors. Megan Wolf, the administrator, more or less the executive director of our Wisconsin Election Commission, is the new president of the board at Erick.
Right.
Really a closed universe of very like-minded people who happen to have the keys to the government power to administer elections. And it's a small universe of Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. His wife's name was on it, but so Zuckerberg comes to town with $400 million. He hires David Plouffe, the author of Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. And then they use Zuckerberg's money and David Becker's professional expertise. These are all very smart people. And they go to town and they do a partisan get out the vote in our state. And we have to fix that.
Absolutely. I was going to mention one thing. I had a report sent to me on David Becker, and I don't know if you guys had known this. And this goes back to what you said about him being a nonpartisan. In 2005, he was a trial attorney with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Voting Section, and he was let go because he was doing some unethical things. As one person said, it was the most unethical thing I've ever seen. That was Brad Schlossman. Hans von Sprockenberg. Thank you. He said that there's no way that he should have been hired. He was supposed to be nonpartisan. He wasn't. And in the emails they uncovered of David Becker at the time, they revealed nasty, disparaging remarks against Republicans. This was way back in 2005. And then, guys, from there, he went on to work for the Pew Center in one of their organizations. They have several organizations there. So in one of their organizations, then he started the Erick group, and the rest is history. But this man has had a very partisan past since at least documented back to 2005.
And the difference, one of the Democratic legislators asked me about that at the end. She said, well, Mr. Gableman, you've had a partisan past too. And she went on to miscite some facts. I was, in fact, appointed as a district attorney as an independent. So I was neither a Republican nor a Democrat, but I was an independent. And she said, and so the whole idea that she had in mind was to disparage my work and undermine the conclusions of my report. But as I told her, the difference between people like David Becker and me running this and writing the report, conducting the investigation, is I'm very happy to tell people about what I did. And I'm very happy for people to be able to judge for themselves. We're putting together thousands of pages of document, and we're putting together thousands of pages of documents so that nobody has to take my word for it. They can look and judge for themselves. Now, that's quite different from the hidden way that David Plouffe and Mark Zuckerberg and David Becker and the CTCL people come in pretending to be nonpartisan, but then literally, we're not talking metaphorically, they were here in person. One of them stands to mind as a guy named Michael Spitzer Rubenstein, who worked at the National Vote at Home Institute. Now, anyone who's trying to follow all these acronyms, don't worry about it, because there are only about 7 of them. and if you hear all at once, it sounds overwhelming. But if you keep listening about it, you see the same names will keep coming up. About the same 7 names will keep coming up over and over. Well, the reason that Spitzer Rubenstein is relevant to what we're talking about is he was one of those so-called partners that Center for Tech and Civic Life required the 5 largest cities in Milwaukee to work with. And Spitzer Rubenstein made no bones about that his job was to defeat President Trump. Well, he wound up literally running the election in one of our state's 5 largest cities, that is the city of Green Bay, on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020. And thank God the good citizens, the citizens of Green Bay who were present that night, they started questioning him. And one of them actually got Spitzer Rubenstein physically thrown out of that center. Now, he had such a substantive control over that election in Green Bay that he was given exclusive access. He had all the keys to the giant ballroom at the Hyatt Hotel there in downtown Green Bay. It's a very nice place. But he had all the keys. Nobody else had keys to where the ballots were stored. And even worse, nobody could go into that room, according to the terms of the contract between City of Green Bay, who had just a few employees at the top, from the mayor, Erick, a guy who is so proud of all of his conduct, Jim and Patty. Erick is so proud of the way he ran that election that he's only hired 3 out-of-state law firms to keep himself from having to answer any of my questions. And so they gave the keys. Wow. They gave the keys to the election to Spitzer Rubenstein. And it's a very simple plan. People just can't believe it, but it happened. And we've got to figure out a way to make sure it never happens again.
Can I ask a simple question to one of you? And that is, how can that be legal? That they were given keys to the counting room to this partisan operative working for the
who lives in New York?
Is that legal? Is that legal?
Well, Patty, you're right. He's a lawyer out of Brooklyn, New York. If you go on the internet, got a wonderful picture of him standing arm in arm, literally, with Mayor de Blasio. Mm-hmm. As to the legality of it, I certainly take the position that it is. If it's not legal, if it's not illegal, it ought to be. There's a gray area. See, their whole philosophy that they've been operating here, Jim, they say, well, there's no statute that prohibits that from happening. And that's crazy. The law says that it is the 1,852 municipal clerks in our state who have the lawful authority and obligation to administer our elections. That brave public servant, Chris Teskey, who had been at the clerk's office for decades, she quit 2 weeks before the November 3rd, 2020 election, saying that Spitzer Rubenstein and the people that he brought with him have completely taken over, and there's nothing she can do, and she wasn't going to be a part of a scheme that she knew was wrong, and she left.
And this is Green Bay, just for clarification. Green Bay City Clerk, yeah.
Mayor Erick and he spearheaded the effort, and he had some very able helpers there. Celestine Jeffries, who had been his chief of staff, who is now the clerk of the city of Green Bay, appointed by the mayor, and another guy named Ahmad Rivera. There's a hyphenated name in there somewhere, but I can't remember.
Wow. Patty, you wanted to talk about the nursing homes.
Yeah, I mean that I think that was probably the one piece that got the most attention, or the one the conversation or the testimony yesterday from Justice Gableman that showed Erick in the nursing homes interviewing patients who, you know, for anybody watching it would question why these people were voting. I mean, probably the most stunning moment, I don't remember her name, was the woman that didn't know who the president of the United States was and didn't know who the governor of Wisconsin is. And so, but yet she voted in 2020. I think that was probably, those were great visuals, because we talk about these things happening and we explain how these things happen. But I think when you actually see it in front of you, it was very impactful. And for a lot of people, I think that was very impactful.
These are brave citizens who came forward because they know that they're taking the risk of being ridiculed by the media, who doesn't care about anything. Patrick Marley, who's the main reporter for our state's largest paper, if he tells the truth, it's only coincidental. He's a flat-out partisan. These people know that they are at the tender mercies of a bunch of cowardly partisans who pretend to be reporters. So I want to just take a second to praise them and thank them for doing and I'm talking mainly about, of course, the families of these residents. When they were victimized, their loved ones were victimized. The Wisconsin Election Commission, which is composed of 6 members, all appointed by the legislature and the governor. We got 6 commissioners. And they're supposed to be the guardians of honest elections in our state. Well, 5 out of the 6 of them took away all of the protections that the law requires be in place for residents of long-term care facilities, nursing homes, and the like. And normally there have to be at least 2 special voting deputies, one from each party to keep the other honest, who are trained in working with the elderly and the vulnerable, and they take an oath to do their job in a neutral way. And then those 2 go into the nursing home, and anyone who requested a ballot, any resident there, whatever assistance they might need. The law also prohibits any employee of the nursing home from assisting in that process. Not just that, the legislature recognized the very real potential for overreach and the vulnerability of these residents, and said not even anyone who worked at that nursing home in the previous 2 years can serve as a special voting deputy. The legislature, the 5 out of 6 WEC commissioners knowingly and publicly said they were going to disregard the law and make it up as it went along. Now, I've been in that room where they make those decisions. Anyone can go. It's a public room. And it's 2 blocks east of the Capitol, right in downtown Madison. And Madison was famously called by our former governor, Lee Sherman Dreyfus, 55 square miles surrounded completely by reality. And what that really means is people go to Madison and they're totally surrounded by leftist bureaucrats. And so as a commissioner, if you are not, you got 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So you got 3 Democrats, 2 of them in particular, Ann Jacobs and Mark Thompson, are just flat out, and they're very effective partisans. And they don't make too many bones about it. They don't really pretend to be nonpartisan. But we had 5 out of the 6 sit there in that room. They're all isolated from the real world in that room. They're surrounded by leftist bureaucrats who want to see all of these things happen. And so somehow when they're sitting there, that sounds like a good idea to expose the vulnerable elderly to the tender mercies of someone who hasn't been trained, who has no responsibility, no anything other than a moral responsibility that they might happen to feel, to do it right and to do it fairly. And I thought it was important, and I want to really praise my friend Erick Kaardal. Erick did a fantastic job interviewing these people, and the sincerity and the truth, the integrity of the entire process was really made clear by the way that Erick conducted that. And the Thomas More Society has been a fantastic ally for finding the truth, and they have the spirits of happy warriors, and we just keep going. We're, as you know, Jim and Patty, we're outnumbered and we are way outfunded, but we just keep going one day after another. So the nursing home, Patty, the nursing home, that was criminal. And to bolster that, the sheriff of Racine County, one of our largest counties by population, has referred criminal charges. Our district attorney declined to prosecute. She didn't think she had jurisdiction, but she certainly said that what happened was illegal and that a prosecution ought to take place.
I'd like to thank Erick too. Watching his interviews with those families was not just professional, but respectful.
Yeah.
Which is much more than what these Democrats did when they committed elderly abuse, I believe, and stole their votes. That you can't have a respect for another human being when this is how you treat them, the most vulnerable. So Erick, you did a fantastic job with that piece. It was very powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a very moving experience for me. I had an experience, with litigating against the government. Guardianship law is something I'm interested in doing as well. And I had a lot of experience with elderly people. In fact, a lot of experience with the voting rights issue. And so when I engaged these clients, really, in the end, they retained me. I represented them in that process. It was very professionally rewarding because I was looking out for their interests and their family's interests. And so when you think about someone who's under a guardianship order, do not vote, they've come to the court and they've asked for the court's protection, right? Some of these guardianships are voluntary. They're not opposed to the nursing home's support, or the family members are supportive. And then to have, these other people come into that person's life who's supposed to be protected by the government and have them violated in that way. I mean, it's horrific elder abuse. And I think one of the things that I had a lot of confidence going in is because we had the guardianship orders. Mike had expressed interest in the topic. That I kind of knew that we had them. We're talking about all these resources on the other side. But remember, all those resources have gone to one thing, and that is to narrowing their mind. So in a way, I've narrowed my mind in the sense all I do is sue the government, and I try to be good at it. But David Becker, he doesn't even move around in subject areas. He just has one subject area. I bet you I'm moving around in different subject areas. He just has one, and he's like narrowed his mind, and he's convinced all these people to agree with him. And then look at the reaction to the videotapes, right? You had that representative, you had two journalists at the press conference, and then a lot of media, and Ann Jacobs had a comment as well, the chair of WEC. And the comment is this: look how narrow the mind is. Erick, in Wisconsin, you don't lose your right to vote when you're old unless it's adjudicated by a court. Okay, got it? So those are my two cases. And there are 6 cases where they're not adjudicated, but they're not capable of voting. And so my point back is, boy, you're jokers. You're kidding me. Voting for someone that's incapable is voter fraud. To vote for someone else, to vote an incapable person is voter fraud. And we just got them. See, all hundreds of millions of dollars narrowing their mind, and they fell into our trap, didn't they? Fell right into the rhetorical trap. They're done. They have no credibility anymore because they defend elder abuse. If you're willing to defend elder abuse to win an election, Do you think defending Zuckerberg bucks or illegal drop boxes or indefinitely confined nonsense? That's easy. They're attempting to defend elder abuse. I mean, that's how committed they are. But the rest of us are just standing there laughing. The public is laughing at them. They're mocking the government officials who would defend elder abuse to defend their own conduct. So in my view, they're kind of dead men walking. I mean, Soros could put another billion in. Zuckerberg could $1 billion in. But if they're going to defend elder abuse, we're going to win because the courts are going to protect elderly people from these leftist hordes. And I think it's really an important point that as they narrow their mind, we are narrowing our minds and catching up with them. And then they go to this absurd point where their position is obviously immoral and even evil. And that's what we're dealing with. And so that was a really nice point, Patty, you bring that up. But I wanted to finish that off because go back and read the responses. Governor Evers doesn't care about old people in Wisconsin. Attorney General Call doesn't care about old people in Wisconsin. Ann Jacobs doesn't care about old people in Wisconsin. The only people who care about old people in Wisconsin are us. And us happens to be like 80 or 90% of the state. And that's a good place to be, right, Mike? It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really comfortable.
And Eric, and the other thing, Patty, going to your point, and I agree, of course, with everything Eric just said. We got 92,000. We saw 8 residents the other day in those videotapes. We got 8 down and about 91,988 to go. I'm sorry, 92 to go. We got 92,000 residents of nursing homes.
That was my question. How many?
In the five Zuckerberg cities that took the Zuckerberg money and did with it what they were told to by David Plouffe and David Becker came in at the other side. But Tiana Epps Johnson, the former Obama fellow who completed her fellowship at the Obama Fellow Program in downtown Chicago, and then in less than a month, she was the one distributing the money to the 5 cities. And her whole specialty was in get out the vote. And that's what the contract. So we got 92,000 residents of these nursing homes. And in the 5 Zuckerberg cities within the counties that those cities are located in, our studies show that in those nursing homes, there is a minimum of 95% voter turnout in those ballots received, all the way to 100% in many of the instances. So no less than 95% of the residents. This whole thing stinks, and we've got to find what happened to the rest of the 92,000.
Amen.
One of the things I wanted to mention about Wisconsin, which is unique, and Mike is a leader on this, but the amount of government investigation that's shown and been proven to be illegalities. So you can start with the Wisconsin Supreme Court decision regarding the advice coming out from election officials that if you're in the COVID situation, you're indefinitely confined, so you don't need to show your ID to get an absentee ballot. That's one that went to Wisconsin Supreme Court. So Wisconsin Election Commission and the election officials violated the law. 2, recently the Waukesha County Circuit Court found the drop boxes to be illegal, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court voted 4-3 not to allow the drop boxes in the April primary. That's 2. 3, as Mike mentioned, the Racine County Sheriff found that the private was not sending out the special voting deputies. By doing that, the Wisconsin Election Commission members committed felonies. The Legislative Audit Bureau found about 40 violations of law by the Wisconsin Election Commission, horrific database keeping, also the issue of sending out the special voting deputies. And then 5th, Mike's report. So when we say there are serial violations of law in multiple subject areas, I mean, private investigation, we've helped, but the government authorities are agreeing with the private investigation. And so you have all this agreement between government officials, judges, private parties. I mean, it's just a matter of time that these guys are going to get basically roasted in court. And we have the litigation going. Mike's got the litigation that he's got going to just get the information. He's going to win those cases because when you have all this violation of law and all this obstruction, Well, they're obstructing because they don't want these violations of the law to be fully exposed. And so there's 9 cases Mike has. I have a half dozen cases. With Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty has an important case in Wisconsin Supreme Court. So all these cases are coming to roost, and why all the newspapers are saying Wisconsin is ground zero for election integrity in these election battles is because there's investigation, real investigation. Mike's doing a real investigation. I'm doing real investigation. These other states, they didn't do it. Why didn't Arizona do it? Why didn't they do this investigation? If they had done this investigation, they would have found the exact same illegalities. If they had done this investigation in Georgia, they would have found the exact same illegalities. Now in Michigan, Thomas More Society is doing investigation through Thor Hearn's lawsuit. So there's great progress in Michigan, similar to Wisconsin, but we're finishing up Wisconsin and we're going to move to Lansing. In fact, Mike and I have visited Lansing a few times, giving updates on what's going on in our Wisconsin investigation.
Wow, fantastic.
Can I bring the conversation down to a very, very street level topic that we really need to talk about? And I got it from something Erick just mentioned in passing, and that is voter rolls. Now, Jim, as you know, because you did that amazing work on that series that you did about the Electronic Registration Information Center, Erick, most people that I talk with are very shocked to learn. Most people not connected with government agencies or voting issues. In Wisconsin, we've got about 5.5 million residents. Of those, about 4 million are eligible to vote, 18 or over. We've got, on our voter rolls, we've got over 7 million names. So 4 million eligible voters, but yet somehow 7 million people on our voter rolls. And if you talk to David Becker, he will say to you, and he's very well paid to say this, and he says it with a straight face, well, that's the best way to have an accurate voter list. That's what they say. And that's what Kevin Kennedy, who had hired Megan Wolf, and Kevin was fired. Kevin Kennedy was essentially fired. They didn't fire him. The legislature found it easier to dismantle the agency he ran, to just demolish the agency called Government Accountability Board. He's the one who started the policy of keeping deliberately inaccurate voter rolls. Dead people, people we know have moved out of state, their names are never taken off the voter list. And Megan Wolf, who was hired by Kevin Kennedy and was his assistant, and now finds herself as the administrator of Wisconsin Elections Commission, has kept that up. What we need to do, what we absolutely, I'm sorry, I have some feedback, and I don't know how to fix it. Is this a little better?
Oh, we're fine.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, we have the key. I believe that 80 to 90% of all the suspicions and doubts that were generated as a result of the November 3rd, 2020 election, these people like David Becker, they operate in darkness. They operate in darkness, Jim. They do not want accuracy. They do not want their conduct to be exposed. Because if the normal citizen learned about how they do it and how Megan Wolf over at WEC does it, they'd say that makes no sense. They have a budget of $10 million a year, but they can't even manage to have accurate voter rolls. The first thing we need to do, we need to make our voter roll accurate, and accurate the way not a WEC bureaucrat or a David Becker would think about it, but the way a normal human being would be to say, no dead people on that list, no people who we know have moved out of state. We have live people who live where they say they lived in the state. And then right now, WEC puts all of that behind a paywall, $12,500. And they step back when you call them on it and they say, well, that's what the law says. Yeah, the law says that because that's the administrative rule that they push. They leave that part out. So regardless of who's to blame for it, but I know that they're to blame for it, regardless of who's to blame for it. We need to end it. The taxpayers have already paid for that information. They need to have, everyone should have access to it for free. Political candidates, interested citizens, newspapers. Somehow newspapers have become just fine with hiddenness and darkness when it comes to the activities of David Becker and all of these Soros funded and Zuckerberg funded election efforts. Somehow they just don't want to know. We need to make those voter lists accurate and freely available to the public who already paid for them. And then as a third step, when people vote within 48 hours of that election, everybody who voted, their name and address needs to go up on the internet and be freely available so that anyone who wants to can verify the accuracy of the election on their own by comparing the two lists. It's such a simple, straightforward, budget neutral. It just seems, it's so common sense that I think even despite the bureaucrats' wish to hold off against it, I think once people learn about this, they're going to demand it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I was going to mention, obviously, Patty and I have both been covering a lot of the situations in Wisconsin, and even on election night, there was this operative, Claire Woodall-Vaugh. And one thing we've seen in all these states talk about patterns is the chain of custody. It seems like it's just no longer an issue. It's no longer, no one's doing this. It's just not taking place. She had this flash drive on election night, and she loses it across town. And it's just the weirdest story because there's no chain of custody there. We wrote about it. Of course, we get attacked by the media and fact checked. But you know, it's unbelievable because this happened on election night, and people are just, we're supposed to be fine with this right now. It's very upsetting to me that we have in state after state, there's this no chain of custody. There's no Republicans in the room. Patty was a victim of this. She could tell us about it. They block people out of the room. Yep. They lock you out of the room. They board up the windows. They drive vans in the back of the room. You're not supposed to see it in the back of the arena. All these different things, and we're just supposed to accept that. Is that something that bothered you at all in your investigation?
I was there that night. I volunteered. I was over at Milwaukee Central Count for over 24 hours. I saw it now, and I was shocked. I was really shocked. I had never been a poll watcher before, and I was shocked at how confrontational, how quick-tempered these so-called public servant poll workers were. Mm-hmm. I got there early in the morning, and I noticed that many of the counting tables were set. The law presumes in Wisconsin 3 to 6 feet, so that an average observer can have a chance of observing these ballots, which even at that, it's really impossible. Well, they had this room set up, this giant room, where at some points the ones going through the ballots were 50 feet away from people. I simply brought up the fact that the law says 3 to 6, and this guy who I now believe was Zuckerberg or CTCL operative, because now I know that they paid, Soros paid, Zuckerberg paid, CTCL used Zuckerberg's money to pay for people to come in from New York and from Chicago to run the polling operation, to run the ballot counting operation in Milwaukee and Green Bay and other cities. And this guy came charging up. He was a little bigger than I am, believe it or not, a little taller and younger. And he told me that if I didn't shut up, he was going to call the police because I was making a disturbance. And so this whole thing with Claire Woodall-Vaugh, Jim, that you brought up with her memory stick, that memory stick had the official tallies from all of the tally machines at Central Count. And I remember her leaving the building. I was there at about 4:30 and 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, whatever it was. And we were all shocked. She was taking that memory stick down to City Hall so they could add it to the numbers. And she came back, and the explanation we heard was that she forgot the memory stick. And as you're pointing out, who had it? Who had the memory stick when she was gone, and what did they do with it? I mean, these are common sense questions, and then to add just a little more darkness to the proceedings, the police who escorted her, they put her in a police SUV to drive her, and these police officers are with her. They made a report to the FBI saying that they thought that Claire Woodall-Vaugh, who is the head of the Milwaukee Elections Commission, which is the city of Milwaukee elections official, they thought that she was acting distraught, that she was not sincere. They didn't speculate why, but they thought that the FBI should take a look into it because it was just so odd how dramatic she was about really trying to impress upon these police officers that she had forgotten this memory stick. Remember, that memory stick is the culmination of all of her work for months, and it is her one purpose in going downstairs and getting into that police SUV and going to City Hall. And she is saying she forgot it in such a bizarre, suspicious way that the officers who were driving her reported it to the FBI as a suspicious event.
And of course, we have no idea if that was ever followed up on. I'm sure that it wasn't.
No, and that, I guess, that cries that shows us why we cry out for transparency. Years ago, not too long ago, before the internet, the city of Milwaukee used to put up billboards in the different neighborhoods, and they used to put up all of the eligible voters' names on the billboards so people could go and check. And that served a number of purposes, but one of those purposes was to keep everybody honest. Here it is. Here's your information, so that if neighbors saw Mrs. Green's name at 123 Main Street, and the neighbors knew that Mrs. Green had died 3 years ago, then they would know Mrs. Green had no business being on that voter roll. And so let's just bring that old practice back up to date and let everybody have the transparency that the left in the media and the left, like David Becker, claim to love when they do all these open records requests to bollocks us up. 3 of our lawsuits revolve around open records. And they claim to love transparency when it's used to attack and scrutinize and trip up conservatives, or people, not even conservative, people just trying to find out what happened. But yet when it comes to how they administered a public election, they've got millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars worth of legal representation. Erick, the mayor of Green Bay, has 3 different law firms, 1 from DC, 2 from Madison. Also, he doesn't have to tell anybody how he ran supposedly the most perfect election in the history of the country. He's covering it up. He's being assisted by the leftist media. The Gannett newspapers are terrible. I don't know what their editorial policy is other than to help the ones who engaged in illegal and cheating conduct, even if they're public officials. Their editorial policy and their so-called reporters' policy is to help them cover it up.
Listen to this one. I think this is just fantastic, Jim, with your work on Erick and so forth. So Erick says, "Oh, we're great at voter database management. CEIR is innovative in election database management." And then we just go into Wisconsin and we ask a couple questions, right? Like the questions that came out in Mike's report was, one, do you collect from the circuit court's guardianship orders to indicate in the database these people are ineligible to vote? And they don't. The circuit courts have the orders. The election clerks and the Wisconsin Election Commission go with the orders. They don't. So they're not marked as ineligible. That's why they get to vote. Then secondly, with respect to non-citizens get driver's licenses at the Department of Transportation when they're on green cards or have work permits. And that non-citizenship information isn't reflected either. But Erick would know it because other states do that. So how come Erick and CEIR aren't telling Wisconsin to do these obvious things that the Help America Vote Act requires, like states collecting information about ineligible voters and putting it in their database?
Amazing. Patty, Patty, you worked at the Wisconsin
Michigan
TCF Center in Michigan. I'm sorry, in Detroit, and ran into very similar situations while she was there. It's just remarkable how we're seeing so many of these same things repeated over and over.
It's the same people. David Becker and Tiana Epps Johnson at CTCL executing the David Plouffe plan from his book, Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. And Plouffe, a few days after the 2016 election, David Plouffe wrote an editorial that appeared in the New York Times, and he listed out Hillary Clinton, the reasons Hillary lost. And reason number one is that she did not spend enough time in cities, including, he named Milwaukee, Detroit, and Philadelphia, and she didn't do enough to turn out the African-American vote. So you look at all the contracts that Mark Zuckerberg hired David Plouffe, who then in turn farmed it out to Tiana Epps Johnson and company at the Obama. Oh, and Tiana's office, CTCL, is literally the former office in downtown Chicago of the Obama campaign. So that's where CTCL is based out of, Obama's former office. So Zuckerberg hires Plouffe. Plouffe hires CTCL. CTCL brings contracts to Wisconsin's 5 largest cities, and I believe other cities, requiring them to put into effect the David Plouffe plan. Plouffe says if he can help it, they'll never make those same mistakes again. And he's writing in 2019 that the 2020 election may very well come down to a political block by block urban warfare in Milwaukee. And so it was.
Wow. Justice Gableman, there was a report this morning that you were meeting with Speaker Voss. Can you tell us anything about that meeting? And also, can you tell us anything about your contract?
Sure. The speaker and I, the contract, as I mentioned to the assembly the other day, I believe I have an ongoing contract. However, I am in discussions with Speaker Voss about what form this investigation will continue to take. What will the Office of Special Counsel be doing now? This report was an interim report. We hope to have a final report, but nobody will willingly talk with us. We have all these court battles that need to be addressed to get the court orders to force these mayors like Erick Genrich in Green Bay and Corey Mason in Racine to do what they should be doing anyway, which is telling us all about how they ran a perfect election. So we've got a lot of litigation to wade through. And Robin Voss, the Speaker of the Assembly, he and I are having some very substantive discussions right now, and I hope to have a new contract in the next few days.
That's good news. Patty, do you have some more questions, or should we wrap this on up?
Yeah, I think we can probably wrap it up. I wanted to ask, we talked about the Zuckerberg 5, and we've talked about Zuckerberg's influence. Jim and I having conservative media websites and conservative news Facebook pages, we felt the effects of Mark Zuckerberg on just our traffic. After Trump won the election, he was inaugurated a month later, I lost over 90% of my traffic on Facebook. At the time, I was getting between 36 and 38 million engagements on my Facebook page. That's all been taken away from me. So for Jim and I, it's not that incredible for us to think that Mark Zuckerberg had a hand in what happened in the elections, because he certainly had a hand in silencing conservatives on Facebook. And there were only a few conservatives, or so-called conservatives, that were allowed to survive on Facebook after Trump won the election. So we know firsthand what the effects of Mark Zuckerberg and his money and his influence can have on conservative media and silencing people like us. And even though pretty much every time Jim and I, put something up on Facebook about election fraud, we get a notification or some sort of a fact check violation because, we're not telling the truth about election fraud. So we're in an uphill battle, and I really give both of you a lot of credit. This is not an easy battle that we're in. I think that the good news is that I think that most of America is behind us in this battle. I really do. We see it every day. I think that it is the hot topic for the upcoming election. People want to make sure that the elections are safe and secure, and they don't want the drop boxes. A lot of people are calling for paper ballots. They don't want to see machines in the next election. But I know one thing: if I were to ask, all the people that follow my Facebook page and my website, and I think Jim would agree, the number one concern right now is the upcoming election, and will the elections be safe, and how can we even count on elections being safe? So I think what I wanted to just ask both of you is, what kind of action can be taken before the election that can prevent these things from happening again, specifically with the Zuckerberg boxes. I know that in Wisconsin, the Zuckerberg boxes won't be used in the next election, but what about in the midterm elections? What can be done to stop these boxes from being used? And I think with the incredible work that True the Vote has done, showing the ballot mules, and I think that that's going to all be exposed pretty soon in all these same cities that we're talking about. We're going to see, how the ballot harvesters use those boxes as well. I think people want to know, is there going to be a stop? Are we going to find a way to stop this from happening in the next election?
Well, I think people ask me that a lot, and the real answer is, well, our government officials are supposed to administer our elections. Our founders said that it was the people who were supposed to put them on. The people. This is up to the people. This is not a job we can delegate. This is not a job that the people can turn over to the so-called experts, because, well, I believe 95% of our clerks are fantastic and do a fantastic job. We got the 5% who are partisans and who seem to be willing to do just about anything in order to have a partisan outcome. So here's the answer. Get educated, educate yourself. It's hard, it's difficult, and we who are concerned about voting integrity, honest elections, we can say voting integrity, but I think honest elections, that's what people want. Mm-hmm. We have to get together with our fellow citizens, and we have to train our citizens as to what to look for, what they can do about it, who they can call when on election day they see suspicious behavior. And then we have the other side of that coin is something that I don't think that we've had really, is someone on the other end of the line of that phone, who gets that call complaining about some bad conduct like I saw at the Central Count in Milwaukee. Someone on the other end of that line who can actually do something about it. But the key ingredient in all of that, the critical part of that, is to show up and observe. The citizens of the city of Green Bay, they're the ones who literally chased Michael Spitzer Rubenstein down in that Hyatt ballroom that they had rented out for central count in the city of Green Bay on election day. They made him sign his name. And they made him sign in as a poll worker. That's how he identified himself when he signed in. And that when he was cornered, not by officials. The officials were Chris Teskey, the good one, had quit. The one who wanted, the clerk who wanted the honest election in the city of Green Bay, she had quit out of frustration and just disgust. It was citizens in Green Bay who cornered that guy. It was a citizen who made the complaint that he was improperly doing things and resulted in the police throwing Michael Spitzer Rubenstein out. The people have to show up, and they have to be willing to stand up for their rights. You got enough people watching. I don't care how many they bring in from Brooklyn or elsewhere in New York or Chicago. We're going to take it back. And what I mean by taking it back is we're going to actually have elections that people can have confidence in those 5 largest cities and everywhere else.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that the populism is required, the more ancient binary, people versus the government. Screw the left, right, Republican, Democratic thing. Go right to the government with your complaints. And so what you kind of find out is it's the red blue pill thing in the Matrix. You know, if you don't take the red pill, man, you're walking around thinking the public school's working for you, the city's working for you, the election officials are working for you, the federal government's working for you, the state agencies are working for you. But if you take in reality, you find out the Gramsci long march to the institutions is almost completed. The liberals have set up like entrepreneurs in each of these subject areas, huge nonprofits financed by billionaires to take away the choices that we should have by influencing administration officials. So you win the city election, the city staff's bought and paid for. You win the county election, the county election's bought and paid for. The WEC, the staff's bought and paid for, even if you get the right appointees on WEC. And so you got this problem. So it's like when I hear people say, oh, if we just get rid of the drop boxes, I mean, that's lazy. Your muscles are atrophied. You know, you forgot about the people running the government, not the government running the people. Wake up. But when you wake up, you say, wow, this subject area, the liberals have really, they're dominating it. They're making all decisions. It's not democratic anymore. But they've done it in other issues, the public schools. They've done it with public land use. They've done it with all sorts of issues and abortion, the gay rights, all this stuff. It's all around us. And it was all done methodically. It was well-resourced. It was well-financed. Election integrity is just one area. But the great thing is, in election integrity, we're winning. We've got, Wisconsin Supreme Court case on indefinitely confined. We got the Washtenaw County Circuit Court case on the illegal drop boxes. We got election bribery set up in several court actions. Mike's identified, the nursing home elder abuse issues. I mean, these are just massive wins in all sorts of areas. And our people need to understand, well, how did we win? Well, we worked. Success comes before work, only in the dictionary. It's the people working in areas, and you're a journalist, so I know, investigating. Sometimes investigation leads immediately to news. You're in that business. Sometimes investigation leads to lobbying. And then we have legislative successes, like in all those states that have banned Zuckerbucks. And sometimes investigation leads to courtroom lawyering that gets victories like we've had in Wisconsin. So it's really exciting to win in a subject area, but there's so many subject areas because we've been sitting on our power to take the government back. And so really what's happening here is the government is imposing its lousy, mediocre culture on us when we should be imposing our great, wonderful culture on it. And to get deflected by the left-right stuff, man, you're just getting sucked down the hole. I one last note on the AP fact check on Mike's report. It was the most pathetic thing I'd ever seen. Report omits some facts. Oh, wake up, man. Abandon the liberal narrative. It's gone. It blew up. It blew up when Mike reported it. And so how can they continue with the big lie when Mike has the big facts? Isn't that ridiculous? Right. Big facts, big lie. The people are going to be with us. It's just a matter of time. Keep reporting, keep investigating, keep litigating, keep lobbying, keep messaging. And we're going to win this, and we're going to win so big. We're going to be amazed at how much fruit there is here. But then, there are going to be other subject areas because our public schools are suffering. a lot of institutions are suffering. But let's win this area. We can do it. I want to thank Mike again.
Yeah, no, thank you, Eric. You've been, but Patty, just one last thing. I really do believe this, and this is based on no scientific. I think people must search out and find the candidates for statewide office and for local office who support their view of how elections should be run, and then just work like hell to get those people elected. You remember what Chief Justice Roberts said in his very disingenuous majority opinion in the Obamacare decision. He essentially said at the very end, if you don't like my opinion, we have in this country a remedy. It's called an election, and there's an election. He was talking about the 2012 election coming up in 4 months. Well, we've got an election in Wisconsin, as other states, coming right up in November. Locate those candidates who believe in honest elections. Find the candidates who are willing to make very specific commitments within very specific time. I'm talking about the first 60 days. The first 60 days that, God willing, we get a governor in this state, God willing, we get an attorney general in this state who actually care about having honest elections, because we haven't talked about those characters. Tony Evers, the current governor, told all the clerks to lawyer up rather than talk to me. It sounded like a two-bit hood, really. Lawyer up. And Josh Call saying no matter what Gableman finds, his investigation has no credibility. That's before I even started. So he's a former lawyer from Perkins Coie, and we don't need to talk about him. But we get a governor and we get an attorney general who commit within the first 60 days of doing the right things, doing the correct actions for ensuring honest elections. The people show up in overwhelming force to vote. Again, I don't care how many David Beckers and Michael Spitzer Rubensteins they send in from points unknown. We're going to win.
All right.
Yeah, well, on that note, I want to point out I've been drinking out of my coffee mug by Christina Caramo, who's running for Secretary of State in Michigan, and Matt DePerno, who's running for Attorney General in Michigan. Both have been endorsed by President Trump, and both of them have taken very strong positions on fixing our broken elections and remedying the ease with which a certain party in our state has been able to commit voter fraud for decades, as far as I can see. So we appreciate you both coming on. I would encourage people to not just volunteer to work in the polls, but also to become poll workers, to actually work as a poll worker, because that way you're assured a spot at the table. For too long, these positions have been taken by people that are able to craftily steal our elections. And I would recommend that people apply for those positions to actually work at the polls in addition to being poll challengers. And that's my final thought. Jim, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I just want to thank you both for all the work you've done and your expertise. And we look forward to hearing more. It's exciting that you still have some lawsuits out there. Maybe that's not so exciting, but there's more information to come. And so Godspeed. Thank you for doing the Lord's work here, because we all want honesty and we all want integrity in elections and everything in our life. And so thank you for taking on this very difficult task. Thank you for standing up for the rest of us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, both of you.
That's great. Jim, are we?
Oh, I'm Mike Lindell. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried canceling myself and my pillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For a limited time, you can get my brand new product, My Slippers, for 50% off. That's the lowest price ever. And remember, My Slippers come with an exclusive 4-layer design These layers combine to give you amazing comfort and support and help reduce stress on your feet. And with the durable indoor-outdoor sole, you can wear my slippers anytime, anywhere. I personally guarantee these will be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to get my slippers for 50% off, the lowest price in history. And if you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.